Okay, let's just get this out of the way. In September 2025, conservative commentator Charlie Kirk was assassinated. That's it. That's the one single fact everyone agrees on. Because from that exact moment, the story just explodes. It splits into two completely separate, parallel universes. So today, we're going to explore how one single event managed to create two totally irreconcilable realities. So, on one hand, you've got the official story, right? A grieving widow's heartbreaking quest for justice after her husband, a public figure, is tragically murdered. But on the other hand, oh, it's a completely different movie. It's a calculated, deep state plot, a massive cover-up, and a suspect who might not be a suspect at all. And look, we're not just talking about different opinions here. These are two fundamentally different realities, each with its own facts, its own heroes, and its own villains. All right, so first up, let's dive into narrative number one, the tragic assassination. This is the official story, the one presented by law enforcement and the one that's been publicly backed by a lot of the people who are closest to Charlie Kirk at Turning Point USA. This version of events is pretty straightforward. The suspect, a guy named Tyler Robinson, who they say was a radicalized individual acting totally alone. The weapon, a .30-06 rifle, found right there at the scene. And the confession? Well, after his family was apparently contacted, Robinson just turned himself in. Now, the ballistics were, let's say, inconclusive, but the authorities are adamant that all the circumstantial evidence and the witness accounts, they all point directly to him. And, in the middle of all this chaos, Charlie's widow, Erica Kirk, steps up to take his place, leading Turning Point USA while she's grieving. And you see that certainly echoed by people who support this official narrative. Take commentator the Officer Tatum, for example. He's a former police officer, and he is just unequivocal about it. For him and a whole lot of others, the case is basically closed. Law enforcement has their man. End of story. And right at the very heart of this first narrative, of course, is Erica Kirk herself. Her public message has been really focused on the human costs of all this, right? She's called out what she calls the online dehumanization of her husband and has really appealed for some grace as she navigates this as a grieving widow and a mom. Okay, but here's where it gets complicated. Because almost the second the official story was out, a really powerful, super detailed counter-narrative started bubbling up online. And it didn't just question a few details, it challenged every single core claim of the official story. And leading the charge on this? Well, you've got figures like commentator Candace Owens. She's been a huge champion of this alternate view, basically arguing that the official story isn't just a little bit wrong, it's a complete fabrication, deliberately designed to hide a much, much darker truth. So this second narrative, it really stands on three main pillars. First, there's the patsy theory, the idea that Tyler Robinson is just a scapegoat set up by federal agents. Then you have the handler theory, which claims Erica Kirk was an intelligence asset, literally placed in Charlie's life to control him. And finally, the motive. Why would they do it? Well, this theory claims it's because Charlie was starting to get critical of Israel and had just turned on a massive, massive donation from some pro-Israel figures. And absolutely central to this whole conspiracy theory is this idea of Erica Kirk as a so-called Manchurian candidate. I mean, the term comes straight out of Cold War thrillers, right? It suggests she was some kind of sleeper agent with a hidden mission who was activated to either influence or, well, control her husband. Now, to back this pretty wild claim up, theorists have put together a whole timeline of her life that they say is just full of red flags. We're talking about an experimental school she went to that allegedly had ties to the intelligence community, her nonprofit work with orphans in Romania, the fact that she appeared in actual CIA promotional videos, and even how she was introduced to Charlie Kirk by someone with his own murky background. And it's not just the people involved. Even the murder weapon itself is this huge point of debate. The official story, you'll remember, says it was a .30-06 rifle. But the counter-narrative, they propose something way more covert, an exploding lavalier microphone. They argue that a rifle like that would have caused a totally different kind of wound, and that some kind of small explosive device would actually explain the shards of glass that were reportedly found at the scene. So, as you can imagine, with these two completely opposite stories fighting it out, this thing just broke containment. It escaped the world of political commentary and absolutely exploded into the center of mainstream pop culture. And this is maybe the wildest part. Comedian Drewski drops his parody skit that just goes nuclear online.
Now, it never actually says Erica Kirk's name, but it uses these super specific references, everything from pyrotechnics and certain jewelry to her public mannerisms that made the target completely unmistakable to anyone who was following the story.
And the impact of this skit was just staggering. It blew up, racking up over 40 million views across social media in just a few days. It basically took this really intense, niche political drama and turned it into a national conversation literally overnight. And the reaction to the skit? Well, it was a perfect mirror of the case itself, just completely and totally polarized. Tons of people praised it as brilliant, sharp satire, but just as many people condemned it as a racist, cruel, and disgusting attack on a woman who was grieving the violent death of her husband. Defenders of the skit, like the Humanist Report, they jumped in and pointed to what they called out as hypocrisy. Their argument was essentially, wait a minute, conservatives who have spent years championing unrestricted comedy and fighting against cancel culture are now trying to silence a comedian for making fun of one of their own? So, at the end of the day, what are we left with here? This isn't just a simple murder mystery anymore. It has become this profound case study in how we process information, how we form beliefs, and how identity works in the 21st century. The whole Charlie Kirk case followed a pattern that is becoming disturbingly familiar, isn't it? You have a traumatic event, an official narrative gets established pretty quickly, but then a counter-narrative forms online and gains momentum. Then the whole conflict becomes cultural and partisan, until finally, the truth itself just becomes a matter of allegiance. It's about which team you're on. And that's where we are. The goal isn't really about finding a killer anymore, is it? It's about winning the argument. It's about validating your worldview. The public is basically presented with two complete, self-contained stories that have almost no common ground to stand on. So this whole thing really leaves us with a huge, fundamental question. And this is way bigger than just the Charlie Kirk case. It's about our shared reality. When every single major event is instantly fractured into these opposing, politically charged narratives, how on earth are we ever supposed to agree on what's actually true?